everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the fifth FreeFuse Sessions. I am here with Rex Holiday. He is an instructional designer, and he has some fantastic insights that he'd like to share with you today on a variety of different topics. I, for one, read his article a little while back about learning experience design versus instructional design, and find a lot of his insights to be incredibly valuable, especially as an educator himself. So, of course, I always feel like it's important for folks to, provide an introduction. So, Rex, if you want to give us a little bit more about what you do and what you're all about, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, hello, I'm Rex Holiday, as Mike has mentioned. My background in instructional design started, I don't know, I would say about 15 years ago, maybe. I was working in wireless telecom. And what I noticed was that a lot of the training was cookie cutter training. And we were having 40 hours of training for one type of course. And a lot of the engineers were coming away from that training thinking, man, I don't know if I got anything from that training. If we were lucky, we got about 20%. And I thought that is a real issue because training can be very expensive. And it was taking us away from our jobs as an engineer. So I said, what if someone was to take that training and then make it more relevant to the engineers who are attending that training? And so I said, I wonder what I can do. So I reached out to Human Resources, and I got in touch with their workforce development group. And I said, I'm really interested in instructional design. I think that I could help with making this training more relevant. And so they let me job shadow, and I did. I loved it. I was already in school, and I thought, well, I need to have a degree in instructional design. And I thought, well, what can I do? Because I didn't have any background in it, but I wanted to be able to transition. So I did the PhD in educational leadership with an emphasis in eLearning. And my dissertation was on instructional design theory. So there I was. And then at the end of 2017, I ended my full-time career in wireless telecom and transitioned to doing instructional design. And so here I am.
It's funny too, obviously being somebody who's gotten his PhD as well, a lot of folks they don't see like the grind that you actually go through to be able to, make it through that type of degree and, do the dissertation, and have folks who basically are like, hey, none of this is good, do it again. Hey, your insights aren't working here for me. What is your unique thing and your unique perspective that you have? And I also find it really interesting too, that you move from one industry into another, right? And almost kind of like pivoted the career. Cause, I myself, I spent a couple years in the workforce before I went back to my graduate studies. And it's such an interesting thing, kind of like a night and day experience, right? To go from, hey, I'm kind of like one part of this, sort of overall organization, and I have this role to play, versus when you're doing like a dissertation, you're literally sitting there, and everything that you need to progress forward with is really on you. Right. And, I think that it's funny. There's kind of like this certain element of, a camaraderie that I feel like all of us have who've made it through that type of experience that, kind of always provides this unique perspective, I've always thought. So, in terms of, what we've had a few talks before, and I know that you've described yourself as a self-described introvert. And I was curious, as somebody who, is somebody who creates instructional design, and I believe that you've also done some courses as well. How did you kind of get over, or perhaps how did you sort of build yourself up to being able to, teach and communicate in front of a perhaps, large group of people in order to, educate them?
Well, I just have to put myself out there. You can't think about it, because if you think about it too much, you'll talk yourself out of it for sure. as an introvert. That is just common. But one of the other things they did was I looked at, okay, reality is this: you're gonna mess up, So you're gonna have an error here or there, and I didn't want that to overwhelm me. I didn't want to be discouraged by the prospect that, okay, I'm going to make an error, because it's going to happen and no one is perfect. And I thought, if I just do it, if I just, get into these uncomfortable situations where I have to be the focal point because I hate that, it's gonna help me to grow and to get beyond those fears. In fact, one of the things that I thought about doing was joining Toastmasters to learn how to speak in public. That never really get off the ground for a lot of different reasons, but I would just try to put myself in situations where I had to speak to a crowd of individuals, and so yeah, it's an ongoing process. I'm not perfect at it. I still get nervous when I have to do that, but I think the end goal is to make sure that I'm transferring some knowledge, and I try to focus on that and not too much on how much it terrifies me to speak in public. I think it's still one of the number one fears for people is public speaking. I've actually taught public speaking too in higher ed, which is really interesting. So.
You know what's funny about that is so I'm more of an extroverted person. I think everybody kind of has spectrums a little bit, in terms of like what situations they're in, right? I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not gonna pretend like I know any science behind that, but I've always felt like there's like spectrums to it, right? Because there's things that when I'm in with certain situations with people, I just want to talk to everybody, interesting folks, all good, right? But as it pertains to going up in front of people and presenting something, no matter how extroverted I can be, that's still something where I just start thinking about it, right? Just like you said. And I think it's just a common human thing. You're up there, you have everybody's attention. And being in academia myself, I was able to build on that. Like I became more comfortable and built relationships with folks in the class, and taught them and shared information, and became good at communicating that way. But the first time I ever did a pitch event or a pitch competition where I had to get in front of people, that first time was terrible. And it wasn't actually, I guess, the first time. It was more like the first time that I'd done it since before the pandemic. So I got up there and I hadn't communicated not in front of like a screen like this in ages, right? Like it was a room of people, it was about like 40 people, right? And I basically sat there and it felt like almost like doing a stand-up comedy routine, right? And like unfortunately though, there's not really feedback because no one really laughs, right? And no one gives you like claps during when you're presenting stuff, right? Or maybe they were supposed to, and maybe I was just bad that day. But I just remembered you start getting like the dry mouth, the sort of like you got the heart beating too fast, and I just bombed, right? Like it was awful, right? Completely bombed. And I remember to this, and this wasn't even that long ago, but I just remember thinking to myself like, okay, so I can never let that happen again, right? And so the first chance I got where someone else gave me an opportunity to present what we were doing at FreeFuse, I just took it, right? It was an SF. Like the other one was, out here in LA, but this one is an SF. And I took the flight, went over there to present, the information about FreeFuse. And then it was the actual kind of shift in mentality of not treating it as, as high stakes as like, I need to present this and I need to present it in a way that everyone's going to, look at us in this positive light. When I took all of that out and I was, I just thought about how can I present this in a way that's, sort of in my personality, but at the same time also gives people the idea of what this really is, but packaged in a way that's accessible and, seems interesting to them. And so I actually basically turned this little pitch event thing into more of like a stand-up comedy routine. I added a few jokes, laughed about it a little bit. And that made me a little bit more comfortable because people actually did laugh, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. This is better. But, I think it just bears to say, like, I think all of us have these like little failures that happen. And, I think that no one should, feel like, okay, I can't do this. It's never going to happen. It's kind of just like, you just got to get yourself out there, just like you said. And I just very much appreciate, that mentality of I need to get back out there and I need to, grow myself. And you're right. It's an ongoing process that I still, even myself, have to do a considerable amount of work on, even, thinking of myself as like a pretty good communicator as, normally. So I just have to say, I applaud that mentality from you as well. So, for those who are unfamiliar with instructional design, right? There's actually what I found to be quite a few folks who I've mentioned instructional design to in the past, and they might not, and they're not sure actually what that is. What do you think in terms of where this is placed in an organization? Where do you feel like instructional design has the highest relevance and importance? Is it only just training, or are there things that, there are more things that can be done with instructional design that people just maybe aren't even aware of?
That's a very good question. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you can use instructional design for a variety of things. Of course, people think about training, right, in education, and for a good reason, because that was where it was developed. It was developed, I think, first for the military, instructional design, and I think they were training fighter pilots. What they wanted to have a specific way of delivering this training. They were trying to teach a skill, and they wanted a way to be able to measure, on the outcomes and how that training was taking hold of those who were part of the training. So, but your question is very interesting to me, because I think that instructional design, because the process is really like developing almost anything. You have that, you have this analysis stage. A lot of people will use what they call the ADDIE model. And in ADDIE, that you analyze, and then you design, and you develop, implement, and evaluate. So in that analysis stage, that can fit into anything. Let's say we're trying to develop a new department, and that department is responsible for this new product. Well, you can use that same process for building that department, because that department has a specific outcome that you wanted to accomplish for that product. So yeah, I think that, and also you're working with subject matter experts. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so the whole analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate process that a lot of instructional designers use, and some don't like to use ADDIE anymore. They think it's it's antiquated. But I think that most of us are realistic. Even if you don't say it, you're going to use it at some stage. It's the same with Gagne's 9 events and Kirkpatrick's evaluation model and Bloom's taxonomy. If you're doing adult learning or adult training, designing curriculum for adult learners, you're going to hit those models sooner or later. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Dick and Carey or SAM, the SAM model, and there's really just dozens of them. People don't realize that. So a lot of people just kind of focus on those few, but there's so many. It's just like any other theory. One builds on another, and then it evolves as the need arises. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, every time I hear about instructional anything or educational anything, Bloom's taxonomy is in like the holy trinity of like things that you use to like describe why we're doing things. And, it's funny, like no matter where I go, if I talk to folks about, learning or instructional design or educationally focused items, the boom taxonomy will pop up at some point. Someone will talk about it, and it's a great framework, or however you want to describe it, model, framework, whatever it is. And I think that having that process, like you said, kind of like this analysis and then design process, and applying that actual procedure to doing other things is really, really important. In the last FreeFuse sessions, I talked to Zach Gerard. He's a guy who is working on developing game experiences to connect folks who are actually from different generations, right? And I think that the idea of learning how to apply something that you wouldn't even think would exist in one realm into another place actually brings a lot of power to different types of ideas. Because, while someone might think, oh, you can only use it for this realm, well, guess what? Now you actually can almost, sort of augment it slightly, or even just take the same framework and steps. And you can go from, hey, this is only for developing a training, to now you can develop a whole new framework for developing a department. And I feel like that translation of some procedure from one realm of thinking to another can sometimes lead to this larger benefit in building something great, but also almost learning things in a whole new lens. So what are your thoughts on that? And, when you take maybe perhaps something from one realm and move it into another realm.
And with context, exactly.
I would say that if you were to, perhaps move a model, let's say from, let's say, for example, my friend Zach, right? Just going back to that example, he utilizes commercial games as a way to actually link up, and provide shared connection and meaning between generations of people, because his whole purpose is for connecting the age gaps, right? So, what are your thoughts on, taking something that might have been traditionally in one industry, like the learning industry, or educational industry, and applying it to maybe corporate, or applying it to maybe like how we understand things maybe in a sports realm, or like a physical fitness realm, or something like that?
Recently a lot of sports organizations have been hiring instructional designers, and I thought that's really fascinating. So the NFL, and I believe I'm not sure of the NBA, but I think National Baseball League as well are hiring instructional designers. And I guess their reasoning is that they want to be able to transfer this knowledge, with these players, and because those are huge organizations. A lot of people just look at the players, and they see what's happening on the bench and on the field, but there's a massive organization that's behind all of those teams. And so I guess their goal is to figure out how to make this organization work better, and how to move communications through within the organization. And I guess that involves making sure that people are receiving knowledge that needs to be moved from one source to another more efficiently than I guess they've been doing in the past. So I haven't done a whole lot of research on that. I was looking at Dr. Luke Hobson's podcast, and he talked a little bit about that in some of his YouTube videos as well. So it's definitely something that's starting to take hold and gain some momentum in the industry.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is one recently onboarded user for us, and the sports use case is so interesting to me, right? Because in one realm, we looked at our tool previously as, okay, you can have all of these personalized pathways, people can learn, these individual, little trainings and modules. But in the case of this person, they are actually creating their own, actual basketball academy. And what he found so unique about what we do is we were like, okay, so what if you actually use these to read defenses? What if you actually utilize these to know what decisions to make in real time? Because, for those of us who watch sports, right? Like, what do we always talk about in the crunch time or in the moments that really matter is, what decisions did people make that led them to actually being successful? And I think that it's the collection of, good decision making, and, people call it good play calling. People call it good, sets, and, it's good sets that you run in basketball. Or, people might, call it like, hey, we decided to bunt here versus we decided to swing for the fences, or at least try to, hit the ball into the, the outfield at least and get a single if we're talking baseball. But even just making, decisions and being aware, I think, is a huge benefit for folks who are, trying to train themselves on how to, play the sport better. I think in terms of like, people are trying to move this into more immersive content like VR, where it's like, okay, you can, sit there with the headset and like, look like you're dribbling the ball and stuff like that. And you can kind of get some reps like that, which, I'm sure over time, like that will become more viable. I still don't see like a huge amount of adoption exactly there, but I do think that there's something to be said about helping people get reps and rehearsals for making good decisions, or making decisions that are appropriate in that exact moment. And I do think that across the board, if you can get people to make the right decisions when it matters, whether it's everything from, hey, I need to know how to handle an HR situation that's, kind of like a crucial conversation, as much as it is, hey, I need to figure out what defense is being run, and like I need to figure out what cut or what move I'm going to make off the ball or something like that. Those are all still just a string of decisions that people make. And I feel like, other than practicing, right, which might not be viable in a lot of situations, you need to rehearse these things, and you need to rehearse them without the nature of saying, I'm going to fail if I don't get this right here, right? And so I think that the aspect of doing things with a level of productive failure, I feel like that probably might be a way that instructional designers move into, especially for these folks who are, athletes, right? Like now they can actually rehearse something that's happening. And rather than spending so much time, worrying about, oh, hey, are they training on the right things? It's letting them actually experience the right things, making, decisions that aren't correct and course correcting them, so that when you get into the game, everybody feels like they're, good to go. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, in terms of, let's say some folks want to get started with instructional design, right? And they, whether it's within their organization, or they're going to try and make a proposal to the folks that they work with. What do you feel like are some of the simple, easy ways to get started? Something that they could maybe kind of build off of from where they're at right now with their current organization. And how do you feel like someone should go and communicate that, to somebody, maybe a higher up or something, to help get this program launched and started?
That's a very good question. I was once asked to build an entire organization from the ground up. And what I did was I started with just a skeleton, group. And you have your instructional designer, and then you have your videographer, someone who understands video editing, and a graphic designer. And then you have someone in HR who understands, what's needed as far as those that professional development. It could be compliance, things like that, or it could be training on a product. It could be training the trainer, because the trainer has to know how to train the customer on the product, sort of thing. So it's looking at those different levels of the organization. You could be going to a manager of a specific department and saying, listen, I think we can be more efficient if we had an official instructional designer to help us to build some content, and then train those of us who are working with this particular product and within the organization. A lot of people will start just like I did. I started with human resources and go directly to them because most of human resources personnel is going to be trained in training. Is part of their certification is knowing how to train people. And so a lot of them have that background. They learn that whole professional development part of human resources. So that's always a great place to go. I think some organizations call it workforce development. And so that's the in-house training. And then, of course, they provide training externally as well. So that's on the organization side. Now, if you wanted to just get into instructional design, I highly recommend that you just go to platforms like LinkedIn, go to Coursera, go to some of the other MOOCs that are out there that are providing this instructional design, and just get yourself educated. It doesn't really take a degree. And this is coming from a guy who actually taught instructional design for the University of Utah. That was my very first teaching assignment, was teaching instructional design. And that was really fun to do that. But you don't really have to have the degree to do it. You need to get the experience. The most important part is to get that foundation, get the experience, and then network. You need to get out there. You need to be talking to people who are doing it. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, you can get the degree, and having a degree serves, many different purposes other than just, pursuing that subject that you've focused on for your major. It also serves to show people that you're capable of completing something. You have the drive and the ambition to put all of that into it. But as far as instructional design goes, it evolves too rapidly. If you get a degree, a lot of people are just going to be happy and satisfied with where they are. And I'll give you a great example. When I started my PhD program in 2008. I finished in 2015. When I was done, and this is, my focus was instructional design. The entire dissertation, I worked with the CEO of a large company that was providing training for wireless telecom. I worked with some of the executives at a company that I was working for in wireless. And so I had this down. I knew I had it down, and he had all of this, doctoral level content and education. But when I was done, I didn't even recognize the field. It had completely changed. In those 7 years, instructional design evolved into something. In fact, the theories that I used in my dissertation were no longer relevant. So that's why I say it's more important to get that foundation, get some experience. I mean, even if you're just volunteering, that's what I did. I just volunteered to get the experience, the hands-on experience, do that, and then network, get on those platforms, make sure that you're subscribing to groups that are focused on e-learning and instructional design, curriculum development. It goes by so many different names, but just get out there and then stay in it. You don't want to be an island in this industry, because you'll end up extinct very, very, very quickly.
Yeah, and it's funny about that. That whole aspect is, I feel like if people aren't taking the time to, keep, sort of keep apprised of like the current events of what's going on, right? People might do many things, right? Like they're going to upskill themselves, or they're going to, build upon their current experiences by, doing what you said, either like volunteering or like just getting into the conversations, right? It just, and sometimes there's almost like, it can just be easy to avoid, trying to keep track of all these things. Like you might have, a million pieces of work that people are like, yes, you need to do this. And then lo and behold, maybe half a year to a year later, something new is out there. And now, people, have moved past what you're doing. And now you basically have to play this catch up, right? And so, I can very much appreciate trying to keep in the know. And all of those actionable steps that you've provided to help folks who do want to get started with instructional design, or even folks who maybe are farther along and just need to remind themselves, hey, you need to be back in there, to obviously keep themselves in the loop, so to speak. And it's interesting too, like that you mentioned you don't necessarily need a degree just to get started. Like you can just go out there and you can really build upon your skills simply by exposing yourself to what's going on. Well, as one aspect of the instructional design process, I know that subject matter experts are a large part sometimes of how you need to develop material and how you need to go through. And what I found interesting about what you said earlier was you talked about how you might need to talk to other people in different departments if you are creating an internal system or whatnot. So those are kind of the quote unquote subject matter experts that might exist internally. But what, in your thoughts, what are some of the ways that people can actually better work with folks who are subject matter experts? Are there ways that sort of that relationship can be frictionless? Are there things that you've learned over time that you wish you had known when you were starting off that maybe someone not as seasoned might have known about?
Yes, so let's see. First of all, you have to acknowledge that they are the subject matter expert. I think a lot of times, even if you're working with someone who's like you and I both work in higher ed, if you're working with someone in higher ed, there's a tendency to think that, okay, I know enough of this. I don't really need to communicate with this individual that much. But that's really a mistake because everyone has a different perspective. Even if let's say I'm teaching instructional design, and I'm building a course for a professor who's going to teach an instructional design course. It would be very easy for me to assume that I know enough to maybe I'll say, like, what do you want to put in the content, and just kind of gloss over it a little bit and not really involve them in the process. But that's a huge mistake because you can talk to 10 instructional designers and you're going to get 10 different points of view and ideas, and processes on how they go about doing instructional design. So I think it could hurt you by not involving the subject matter expert, even if it's a subject that you think you know a lot about. So let's just start there. Just acknowledge that you're going to work with them, and no matter what, you're going to involve them. The other thing is, as far as the being frictionless, you want to give individuals the opportunity to have input. And you want to value that input because you're going to learn something. Right? That's it never fails. Once you start to let someone express themselves and just kind of let them talk about what their needs are and how they envision this product that you're going to develop, this course, this content, then you'll learn something new, and then it's going to help to have all of these different insights and inputs. So that's where we go next. And then you might want to point out to them your value to them, because sometimes it's the other way around, where they feel like everything's like, what can you possibly teach me? I know this. You're just a designer. You're just going to put together some content. You're just going to take what I'm going to tell you, and you're going to format it, into a course. So you need to point out to them that you're there to make sure that there's not, let's say, an expert blind spot occurrence where they are so familiar with the content that they completely talk over it. Have you ever written something and you go back and you read it and you realize, I completely missed a few words there because my mind filled in the gaps. And that's what happens with subject matter experts. They're so good at what they do that when they're teaching it, they go completely above and beyond where the students are at that moment because they don't see it. They just, their mind is telling them, you know, they know they have to go A, B, C, D, and to get to Z, but sometimes they'll jump, you know, over some steps because their mind is just telling them. It just kind of fills it in, and I see that a lot. So that's one of the theories that I really look at is that expert blind spot. To kind of keep that in mind because a lot of subject matter experts will, you know, professors do it all the time, you know, when we're teaching, you know, because you taught this subject over and over and over again. You've gone through these lectures, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, the students are sitting there, you realize they're not engaged anymore. So what happened? What's happened is that you've completely, you know, you've hit the accelerator and you're going full throttle, and you've left them in the dust, or they have no idea what you're talking about. So, I think that's important too, to remind the subject matter experts that, listen, I'm going to be here to help you keep it in a layperson's, you know, point of view, if you will, so that everyone can understand what you're such an expert at this. You know, I mean, you're literally the expert at this, but you need to make sure that it's that level of where you want it to be. So, you know, beginner, intermediate, or advanced.
Absolutely. And you know what's you know, sort of funny about the, you know, whole process of that, expert blind spots happen across the board. Not, you know, I always like to laugh about the academia element because, of course, like I was, you know, there for a good period of time, but you know, expert blind spots happen even when you're, let's say you're, you know, starting a company, you built out this entire product, you know, everything it does, and then you get to trying to communicate it with another person and you're like, why? You don't get it. It's so simple. I just told you all the ways you can use it. It's so simple. And someone's like, no, I still don't get it. And it's like, you're skipping steps. Like, you're like, oh, I can do this, this, and this, and this, this, and this. And someone's like, I have no idea what just happened. Like, we just spent like 30 minutes of you just doing this, and I have no idea what you're talking about, right? And so I think that, you know, the problem, it's like the curse of knowledge, right? The problem with trying to teach somebody who's new to something is especially with somebody who knows the subject so well, is that, you know, almost like, I would say almost to keep the mental, the brain processing down for somebody to communicate this information, they almost, you know, utilize their own heuristics, or they utilize their own shortcuts to say, oh, it's just like this, and, you know, you can do this, this, and this with it. And it's why I've always appreciated succinct communication, but also the other aspect of it is, can you personalize communication in such a way where, you know, it's actually accessible to each type of person? Because, like, that's kind of, to me, what's always been the challenge of talking to wider audiences, because everybody sort of absorbs it a little bit differently. And it's why, like, we, you know, I've always been so, and even, you know, the way FreeFuse is constructed itself, I've always believed in the nature of trying to allow people to control their own pathways of experience, right? And by giving them kind of like the infrastructure to say, well, you know, you can engage with this, or you can decide to do this, you can go down, you know, these paths. You know, we combine the nature of succinct communication with shorter bite-sized segments, but we also provide the pathing contextualization to allow someone to know, okay, like, there is, you know, some sort of rhyme and reason to why these things are all structured together. And so I think that, you know, in the mindset of trying to communicate that to someone else, that's always the challenge, right? You know, people, whatever you call it, as either a funnel or, you know, or some way to engage people, you seem to, it seems that the more you communicate through an entire piece of information, the more you lose people, right? Like, it goes from, hey, everybody's paying attention, to, all right, there's only like a set amount of people who are actually paying attention at this point. And I feel like there's ways to address it. And, you know, of course, like, it's one of the things that we've looked to address ourselves and give people the infrastructure. But like you said, you know, at the end of the day, someone needs to be aware that they are blind to their own expertise. And so the method of actually communicating this to other folks is actually more challenging than they really understand, right? But in any case, I know we're running up to time here. So I did want to give you an opportunity to share, anything that you'd like to promote, or, anything that you're working on that you'd like to, share with some of the folks in the audience as well. Or you can obviously talk about your love of Star Trek, whatever you'd like, but always love to give the time to, folks who come on the show and give you an opportunity to share something special.
Okay, well, you brought up Star Trek. That's a mistake. I love Star Trek. I do. One of my favorite things to do is to write some fan fiction, and I don't do the novels, but I will write a screenplay based on the series, so Next Generation, or Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and things like that. Just for the fun of it, just because I just think it's fun to do that. I've watched all of the different series, and I'm caught up. So I have my favorites with that. Yeah, Star Trek is great. I think I was telling you that I have my Star Trek socks now, and and I love that. One of the things that I think Star Trek has taught me is that if you can imagine it, someone is going to make it happen, especially when it comes to engineers. I have a couple of books that talk about the physics of Star Trek and what's possible, and it's surprising, some of the things that we think, that'll be easy. Turns out some of those things are very difficult to accomplish, and some of the things that you think are like impossible, like going beyond light speed, well, it turns out they can travel beyond light speed, right? Who knew, right? Light speed is not that finite as we thought it was, and so yeah. No, so that's enough of Star Trek. But yeah, I can go on and on about Star Trek. One of the things that I did want to talk about is this whole concept of how AI is changing the landscape of instructional design. You hear a lot of people talk about Chat GPT, and it terrifies a lot of people, and it terrifies a lot of the traditional instructors, because they think, well, the students are going to cheat. And my thing is that, one, I think it's here to stay. It's just going to evolve into something even beyond our imagination now, where we see it as now, just like any other technology. And also, I think that if you can take it and apply it to your content, how you're building learning content, I think you can use that to your advantage, because you can prompt students to ask the right questions. Because if they don't ask the right questions, then they're not going to get the right answer back. And so that's one way to use this AI, and with also with intelligent video AI, just like with the FreeFuse product. So one of the things that I see with FreeFuse in products similar to it is that it's going to change how we do the development stage of learning content in the design and development stage, because I can see that storyboarding it's going to become more of a visual thing, and it's not going to be storyboards like you think of course it's visual, because that's how Disney started out making storyboards visual, and of course Hitchcock and Spielberg and others used it quite a lot, but in e-learning and instructional design, it's become more of it's more written content. It's more of this kind of it's like the video scripts that I used to do some video script writing, and then they had the magazine script where you had your audio and video. That's what it is now, and it's just so technical that if you go beyond the production team and instructional designers, it's a lot of people who are involved in the process and who are making the decisions are not that technical. They need you to break it down for them. I think, because a picture, as they say, is worth 1,000 words. You can take that, the FreeFuse AI, and create a visual storyboard. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now is to build an advanced storyboarding course using the FreeFuse product. And I think I want to show instructional designers, say, listen, this is the next iteration of our profession, is to take this and to make it more visual, and it's easier to change the content. So you're changing it in real time. You have your video content, you can move it around, and you have the input from all of the stakeholders, and listen, this is the concept. You can see it, and this is what it's going to look like when we're done. So yeah, that's one of my projects right now. So.
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate the you obviously providing us that really, really nice shout out. I of course, we very much appreciate your support, and we're here to support you as well. We're just always so grateful to have great subject matter experts like yourself who obviously can come on here and tell us so much more about what the major elements of what they do and how these things are really transforming the way that we consume information or technology or just the greater world around us. So Rex, this has been a fantastic conversation. I very much appreciate your time. And for those of you listening at home or watching on mobile or web devices, we just appreciate you taking the time out to come here and view the content. And we will see you at the next FreeFuse Sessions. Thanks.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. See you.